All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Kitzman. I'm the Client Success Manager with SwimCloud. Welcome to part two of our discussion between Coach Kinel and Coach Alex Nikitin. Coach Kinel is a longtime coach from Duneland Swim Club in Indiana and also the Chesterton High School team. So, Kevin, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. As always, it's fun to do these, and we really appreciate everybody that's been hopping on and watching these. And we want anybody to ask questions. That's kind of what it's all about. We're all learning. Again, we have Alex Nikitin, like we did last week, and we're so honored and happy that he's here. And again, Alex is from Multnomah Swim Club out in the Portland, Oregon area. He was the original guy who did the first race analyzer that USA Swimming was doing. So last week, well, first off, Alex, welcome back for part two.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Scott.
Yes, of course. Hey, there's a question already.
Awesome.
How did you two get to know one another?
That's interesting. Kevin, if you don't mind, Tom Avicius is my really long-time friend, and Tom's from Indiana. He used to coach at Carmel Swim Club. So, and I saw first, I was always watching Kevin swimmers. They're making big waves at juniors and all and at nationals, and then Kevin did a series of presentations which. As a physiologist, retired, I can tell you, he explained in his presentations physiology of swimming better than actually any physiologist that I ever met. So, and I think I'm in juniors. I think it was in Texas somewhere. So I approached Tom. I said, Tom, would you be so kind to introduce me to Kevin? And Tom kind of gives this grin and say, how interesting. Kevin just came to me not long ago and asked the same thing. So, and ever since we kind of met, had really good talk about, swimming and shop, and real became friends. I think we're somewhat really on the same length. And I think the world of Kevin, I think he's one of the finest coaches in the club in the country, and I think his track record of development proves it.
Awesome.
That's.
I also, I was using back at that time that Alex is talking about. I was using his program for a while, and we were in the process of developing our own. That's why I was excited to meet with him and see what he thought of what we were trying to do, which was add video to try to make it a little more visual. So anyway, that's cool. That's how we got together. So yeah, thanks for asking. So it's been a fun relationship and a fun friendship. Last week we talked about the underwater racing and underwater velocity, and how do we improve that, and how do we kind of implement that. So we went through some drills and we did that. And then we talked about surface velocity, and how do we develop distance per cycle, and what do we do with stroke rate, and how can we integrate that a little bit. So we went through that. And the second part of this, we want to spend some time on transitions, starts, turns, finishes. And then we want to talk a little bit about maybe some race pace swimming, and how do we work on all these components combined. So there's a lot to that. So I think we're going to probably jump in here, and we've kind of decided we're going to start. I'm going to show a video of Blake Peroni. I'm going to share my screen with everybody here. And this is Blake over here. So this is 100 back at one of the TYR Pro meets last year, and it's a 100 long course. I just feel like this video is so good because all the components are involved here. So I'll let this play. And And Alex, feel free to jump in here anytime. Start, you see the quick kicks underwater, the breakout, and they weren't far from 15 meters. Again, this is Blake right here. And what I find is fascinating here is this was just a plan. You know, he doesn't go flying out there. He's actually fourth at the turn. Again, he's here. These are the three guys, yeah, that were the top three at the wall. But he just starts his move. And it's a planned race. Here he is here. There's mid-pool. When he gets to the next yellow at 15 meters in, just watch him start to take off. And then about 8 meters here, he's going to just stop breathing right there. And he just puts his head down and finds the wall, and he wins that race. And he was fourth at the 50. So I think that's kind of a good starting place here.
Yeah, it's a really great context for everything, because if you really look at it, if you take all those pieces, you don't really have to be the very best at everything in that race to win it, because clearly Blake was not the fastest off the block, was not the fastest to the 15-meter mark. He was not the fastest to the first segment of the race. He had, again, quite possibly not the best turner, but clearly in the field was definitely the best finisher in the last 15 meters. But he was really, really good at everything, and I think cumulatively he was the best in the race as well. And I think that's something to take away, is not to do really everything so spectacularly, but be very, very competent at everything and really exceptional at something.
Right. Yeah. And it just shows you that, you know, everybody does have their strengths. You have to work toward your strengths, and you have to, you know, work on your weaknesses and try to make them better. But it encompasses all of these components that we talked about. So talking about starts, and I think, you know, we'll begin there. This is also Blake here in the white cap. This was his lead off, and I did a segment on this before about his lead off the 800 free relay at NC2As when he went 129. But I like this just because it's a pretty clear photo of the start. And as I play this, and again, this is Blake here, everybody going straight forward. And I think that's a big key too, and not jumping up and getting in. And you can see that field is just everybody's, you know, at least 12 or 13 meters out there with several dolphin kicks. So talking about the start, Alex, what do you feel like are the main components of a start?
Well, I think if
things
you break it
that
down,
you'd like to focus on.
Well, if you kind of break it down on all the pieces, there's a really reaction time, how quickly athlete is reacting to the signal. There is how much momentum athlete creates off the block and carries into the water. There is clearly the entry and composition of the body, how rigid, how much tone that athlete carries into the water in the line. Underwater travel also, the tone, the speed, the frequency of dolphin kicks, the breakout to the surface. So there are a lot of skills that kind of thin sliced in one seemingly, you know, simple movement. And I think all of them are really important in ways, and some are easier to train, some are a little bit more difficult. Like reaction time is very difficult to improve substantially. It's more conservative factor. Also, obviously, the explosiveness of the block will be greater for sprinters, and probably not as great for distance swimmers. But also the significance of the start for the race, for the purposes, is not as much for distance swimmers as for sprinters. But I think entry and the shape of the body really plays a great deal of importance. I don't know if you're if you played with these torpedoes, this rubber toy. So you toss it in the air and it hits the water and just shoots really, really fast. And I was telling Kevin that like to demonstrate my swimmers, I cut one in the middle. So it has this metal wire inside. And that torpedo completely lost its ability to travel fast underwater because there's a shear in between. And I would show these athletes this phenomena and basically to illustrate it and teach them to keep the body really rigid and so there are no shears in hips and in the chest at the sternum and I think that improves the ability to carry that speed, that momentum that they create off the block. So and it's kind of a visual thing.
We were talking about that a little bit before, you use the torpedo, and that's good. I used to take a broom handle and stand on the starting block and throw it in, and it would pierce and go forward. And then I'd take a piece of a hose and try to do the same thing. And it's a way over exaggeration. But the kids realize that if you're wobbly and you're not tight in that real tone, as you call it, streamline, you can't get the same effect, and you can't carry that speed the same way.
Right.
So yeah, those are both ways of doing that. What are some reaction kind of drills that you do?
For reaction times, I've done it with my younger swimmers, which kind of makes it fun for them, but also teaches them important skill. I would change the signal at which they go. For example, take your marks, go, and I would say, okay, it's going to be whistle, or I would say, take your mark, horse, or clap. And then basically those who guess and react and go in a different signal will do some push-ups. It's kind of fun, but also teaches them to react, really truly react on the signal and process it properly. But I've done it also occasionally with my older swimmers. But I think for the younger swimmers, that was the most effect and most purpose, because I think they're still young and developing substantially at that level.
Yeah, I like to do, I call it a clap drill. When we're working on starts, I'll have the kids up there and I'll have them, before they start the whole heat, close their eyes and get their hands up together. And I'll say, take your mark, go. And they'll clap right on the go and get a little bit of visual with their eyes closed, and then take them down and then go. Same kind of thing. Get used to, get ready to respond, but don't do it too soon. And then sometimes wait longer before you say go, and hold them there a little bit. And yeah, just try to get them to react. But it's true. I mean, there's not a whole lot of things you can do to improve their, their nervous center as far as that goes. But
right. And I think I would also add that the starting skills, we're really, if you really look, especially with the senior swimmers, there's always a time constraint. So there's only that many you can do in one practice to
right.
make a change. But I think if you really look at the career of an athlete, and let's say they're in a sport for 6-7 years, and I think doing this in small portions but rather frequently, I think can really create a good cumulative effect. And because start really and the turn really, that's the fastest portion of the race. That's the fastest that the athletes will ever be. And I think it is important. It should be really treated with a really great deal of importance. And I think because the complexity of skill and athleticism involved, it takes time for the skill to develop and kind of settle it. Is if you say what I'm saying, if you spend 1 hour on dives, for example, say once a month, I would be seriously doubting that would be a better thing than spending maybe 10 minutes every day. I would put experientially. I felt that like spending 10 minutes, like small portions daily, is yields the curve. The learning curve is much greater.
Yeah.
And
And before we kind of get into some of the drills, I want to talk a little bit, and this is going to lead me into backstroke too, but depth on this too. You know, the further you're going to carry it out, kind of the deeper you have to go to a point. You know, you've got to have time to be able to get to that position. It's even more evident on backstroke. What are your thoughts as far as depth goes?
well, I think as long, basically I would put it this way, Kevin. The depth may, I mean, some athletes go a little bit deeper, some athletes go a little bit more shallow, but I think somewhere maybe halfway, depending on the depth of the pool. So if the pool is, say, 6 meter deep, maybe somewhere midway. That was a school of thought to really get the waves and cancel the feedback from the bouncing waves. But I really feel the most important criteria is the athlete has to be faster underwater than the swimming velocity. And as long as that happens, I think it really clearly paves the way to stay there up to the legal limit, up to 15 meters. But if the athletes are not faster underwater than they're on the swimming velocity, on the surface velocity, then they're really slowing down. They have to actually re-accelerate, and that's difficult.
Yeah, and
that's not ideal.
Timing, and to be honest, you know, using software to get those velocities and stuff, and timing them to certain points, 8 meters, 15 meters, all those. I mean, those are the ways that you figure out how long they can carry that out. I want to talk about backstroke starts real quick here. This is Reagan Smith over here. But I just want to show you, because this does go underwater as well. You know, talk about flat backs in an athletic position to start with. So the heels aren't, or the hips aren't all the way down to the heels, but you're in a good jumping position. Back is flat. Fast kicks, and they, you know, they go pretty deep, but they're also going about 14 meters underwater. You know, so I think depth has something to do with that. I think your backstrokers and your flyers that are going to carry it out further will go a little bit deeper underwater than your freestylers, maybe, that are going to get up a little bit sooner. But I think it's interesting, and I think the speed of this kick is what is jumps out to me as they're going underwater here. It's just how fast that kick is. And I know we've been having some trouble with Zoom with video. Hopefully everybody can see that. So thoughts on backstroke starts a little bit, Alex?
Well, I think, like you pointed out, Ken, is that definitely it helps to have a good angle and kind of unhinging the movement. I think there's also, if you kind of look, there's a sequence kind of letting go of the arms kind of happens first, and then firing the legs into the line. I think there's really it's a great complex movement, and there is a progression really to teach that. And I think it's a really complex skill, but clearly well executed in this picture, really, on this video.
Yeah. So, and I think,
like the arch, the entry, pointing the toes, clear entrance, and also the timing of the first stroke at which they like athletes really coming up to the surface.
Can you guys address maybe the angle of entry? Coach Hen asked about how that affects like the impact of the depth, and should they air more shallow or more steeply?
And I'll talk about this a little bit, Alex, and I'll let you jump in here. Regardless of the start you're doing, whether it's a track start or whether it's a backstroke start, you got to make sure you're in deep enough water if you're gonna start playing around. But I think on backstroke specifically here, I think the entry has to be reasonably sharp for you to be able to get your feet up and have your feet be the last thing to enter in the water. Because once you do that, when you enter like that and then your feet come down, it's a dolphin. It actually propels you forward. The key, I think, though, is to learn that as soon as you're in the water, to drop the chin and flatten the back so that you stay in that level position, and don't go straight down and go too deep. But I think the angle is important. Alex?
I think, again, I try not to be very prescriptive in terms of angle, but when it's executed, it looks right. It doesn't look like athlete is getting stuck underwater or flaps like a dead fish on the surface. It's but it's definitely the sequence and the way the body unfolds. It makes a great deal of difference. But it's very, very athletic movement, and I found that it takes some time to teach and tweak and use a real different approach. Even pushing off the wall in kind of a V position just to get that initial thrust, really breaking down the movement and kind of putting it back together is important. But again, I'm not so big on exact angles, because when it looks right, it looks good and fast. When it looks wrong, it's obviously, for me, like as a practitioner.
Yeah. Do you? Well, we talked a little bit about, and for me, I like to talk about the start as not just being your reaction or as being just your reaction and entry, but the whole thing. That's why I like to do that 6-second drill that we talked about the last time, so that it encompasses all of the start, the reaction, the entry, and keeping that tension, as you've called it, the knowing when to start kicking, keeping that forward. That's why I think you have to time things.
Right.
Whether it's 8 meters, 15 meters.
Right. 15-meter mark for me was really kind of uniquely kind of a good feedback that I've given athletes. And I think all those components cumulatively, produce that time. And I would kind of have some standards for girls and boys, different strokes, backstrokes, where we would need to be. And occasionally athletes going to get frustrated that they're not improving quickly enough in the skill. And I would kind of help them, okay, let's break it down. Where do you think we're missing something, whether it's, again, and then you go back and give them really tasks to focus. Are you creating enough velocity? Are you reacting quickly? Is your breakout efficient? And then kind of play with the duration a little bit longer underwater, like extra couple of kicks, maybe fewer kicks, and then see how all that affects 15 meters. I really like 15 meters.
Yeah.
15 meter.
I think so too. And it's also a way for you to start developing a plan as far as how many kicks you're going to be taking.
Exactly.
And that's why I like to do that 6-second drill at the beginning of every practice because they know it's coming. They can work on that, and it's a daily thing, and you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it. One other little drill I want to talk about start-wise that I do and that you had talked to me about doing too. And then I want to kind of move on to turns probably. But one thing to work on that tension and keeping their body rigid as they enter, I like to do it. I call it a parachute drill. And I got this from IU. You put a parachute around you, and you place the parachute. If you're doing off the top, you place the parachute between your legs, and make sure that it's right in the center of the block, so it's not going to get caught on anything. But then you do your regular start with that parachute, and what happens is that parachute, as soon as you enter in the water, it catches you and stops you, and it forces you to stay rigid and then into your kicks. I really found that helpful with breaststrokers.
Mm-hmm.
And now you do something similar, diving in with the
pull buoy, with the pull buoy between the ankles, and just really what it teaches athletes to really hold their feet together and keep the body rigid and tight, because if they don't, the pull buoy comes off. And again, I used it with the younger swimmers, or with the older swimmers, those who seem to have the trouble keeping the good body tone. And that, again, it's simple and efficient. I feel that everybody's got the pull buoy in their gear bag. So
yeah, I think that's good. And again, for anybody that's watching, please ask questions, or if you want to see anything again, etc. That's all good. And I'm hoping that this video is coming through. Zoom has so many.
On my end,
it is okay.
Yeah, it's been all right.
Good. Okay, so as far as turns go, when I was talking to you before, Alex, the very first thing that you talked about was the importance of rotation. Rotation and rotation drills. You want to expand on that a little bit in terms of turns?
Yes, basically, if you really look at the turn, they're forward somersault, they're for backstroke and freestyle. So when the athletes would do several hand hits and do like 360 in the tight ball, I only had a couple of athletes that were able in my entire career who were able to do 720 without additional help with hands, and that's actually seems like a simple thing, but it's quite challenging. Only two in 30 years. I mean, it's not a great success rate, but those kids had really particularly good turns. And if you really look at the open turns for backstroke, for breaststroke and butterfly, what it is, it's a 180 backward turn. So now we teach backward somersaults as well, without use of hands, and also no wall turns, where we're kind of teaching athletes to really earn the wall and practice the skill without wall. If anything, it really teaches them how much those walls are of complement to the race, how much they help. Another little turn that like a turn drill that we've done is when we would do on dry land, we would do roll-ups in the bowl, and then I would teach the athletes to flick the toes to aid the rotation, and I'd start to teach that on land, and then take it to the water. So when we were kind of working with all our coaches at the MAC, at the Multnomah Athletic Club, we would teach that really systematically, so that I could see swimmers doing that. It kind of became like a little signature drill, and say, well, that kid came through our age group program, and my colleague Cindy would always teach that. You could see those little kids doing this, thinking that's kind of a trademark, but it really does help create the rotational momentum.
I think you're starting to see more and more swimming movements starting in dry land. and out of the water and then coming into the water. One of the drills, you know, talking about the rotation there, and you know, I refer to IU a lot because I have a lot of respect for Ray Lewis, and he's recruited a lot of my kids through the years, and so he's coming on the deck, and he's done some mini clinics with our club and things like that, and I call them IU whistle turns. One thing that he was doing one time was having the kids floating on their stomach face down, and you might have, you know, hands at your side, you might have a little bit of kick behind you just to keep level, and then you blow the whistle and they just spin. And I like to do it having them face one another and as partners, and they race each other. So if Scott and I are partners, we're floating, and when when that whistle goes, we're going to somersault, and I'm going to try to get around before he does. And you know, kids, you put a game to it and they love it. And then you can do the same thing with going backwards for breast and fly, and it forces them to learn to bring those knees up really fast.
Right.
Got no, you know, you got no chance unless you bring the knees up really hard. So those are good ones too. The no wall turns. We do a lot of stuff early season in a progression of a drill where you turn at the flags and come back out, and you fly in breaststroke. I mean, you have to pull the knees up to be able to do it. Free and back, you know, you got to get around tight.
Right.
And I like to use too a progression there of in freestyle, well, or backstroke, you're turning at the flags, and then right as you're coming around, you're shooting your legs toward the wall and your hands up in a streamline, and you land on your back floating for a few seconds, and then you turn and go. And it teaches them to start extending the feet toward the wall as they're coming around in that rotation. So we call it bouncing off the wall rather than hitting. You call it lagging.
Lag and surge, so eliminating the lag. Yeah, I found that a really good exercise is whenever is available is a trampoline, and you can see clearly some athletes who have really good anticipation and they really fire up. We were fortunate at the MAC to have gymnastics program as well at the club that I coach swimming, and and I would take my younger swimmers to gymnastics arena, and they would kind of really give them a primer, and you can clearly see that it's a skill that they have to kind of learn, because they're not all of them are bouncing as quickly, but that kind of movement translates into the wall. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that surge of the wall.
Right. Getting in and getting out of the wall is so important. And as these guys, you know, you can see here, and this is kind of the next topic a little bit that I want to talk about is your approach to the wall,
right?
Which is so important, and not losing speed. And you want to talk a little bit about your
sure.
pre-cycle going in?
Sure. I for breaststrokers and butterflyers, I always insist on them doing 3 even cycles into the wall. They can be a little bit longer than what they've done in the middle of a race, in the middle of a pool, but they have to be real equal. Right. And also, I'd suggest better. And I wouldn't define better in my way. I say you make sure that they're better cycles that they have in terms of maybe, I don't know, energy, rhythm, whatever. Let them define it. But basically what I really wanted is to elevate their focus for that brief moment, like for 2 seconds leading into the wall. And but evenness is important, not just 2 normal cycles and then 1/2, because what happens is on that short stroke, they're really taking just as much time to do the full rotate, to do the full cycle. All right, but they're going sometimes 1/3 of a distance, so that's clearly a loss. Oftentimes can be even as much as a second. So that's for butterfly and breaststroke, 3 even cycles. For backstroke and free, 3 strokes, also with the same concept. And because
You're
the
talking about
pools,
3 hand hits.
three, exactly, 3 hand hits, exactly, 3 hand hits. Also to be in better quality than anything they've done in the race. And also for freestylers, I would always recommend and teach my swimmers to work to kind of gauge the distance between the wall and where they are from the tee, rather than the line where the wall meets the bottom of a pool, because different pools have different depth, and that line can be really misleading. And tee is always at the same spot. So, and I think that the kind of reframing that helps. And the expectation and their rotation from the last hand hit going in the wall and feet on the wall should be inside of their rhythmic cycle, smaller, shorter than rather than longer.
Yeah.
And
Gentlemen, when should we push off the wall? Immediately on contact, or at the end of the movement? And
Talking about freestyle?
I believe so. I believe so.
Oh, this was a question. Okay.
Yes.
I think that, for example, if you had a stopwatch, and I'll try to get back to these guys turning. If you had a stopwatch, and as their feet touch the wall, you hit that watch and then tried to hit it again as they pushed off, you'd like there to be like no time on it, because it literally is extending in. That's why I think it's important that you extend your feet, as you're coming around, so that you really are bouncing off the wall. And if you practice that enough, you really do get a good push off. Whatever
that's
your
again
thoughts, Alex?
That's just an example of the trampoline.
Yes.
When do you push off? When your toes touch the net. Except the trampoline has some give. The wall doesn't have any give. So and once you're already there, I don't see a point of waiting.
Right. I want to go back to my breaststroker here, and just kind of if you look at the data bars here, and this is I chose this race because he was a little sporadic. This first one, you can see these dots,
Kevin, we're still on Blake's freestyle from tier on our end.
Really?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go back and try it again. What I want to show is the data bars, and how you really see. Do you see that now?
Yep, we're good.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Scott, because on mine, I had this, so I appreciate that. Here on these data bars, this first length, stays pretty even, and actually, goes, gets a little faster going into the wall. And his numbers here, if you look, his fastest rate was 1.2, his average was 1.3, and his max was 1.33. He stayed pretty steady, and he stayed pretty steady momentum going into the wall. And then on this one, he starts slowing down, and it's noticeable in the video too. But his fastest rate is 1.1 here, and he slows to 1.5 before he turns. And that's in anticipation to hit on a full stroke and to do it. So that's why Alex's concept of counting strokes is so important, and getting used to it. Because if you do that in all the strokes, and fly and breaststroke, it's going to be cycles. And then free and back, you from the flags in, you're not talking about a lot of cycles. So you're talking more about hand hits or half strokes going in. But it's important how many you take from the flags in, not just in backstroke, but in all the strokes, so that you get an awareness of where you're going to hit the wall at. And that alleviates some of the long gliding in breaststroke or fly, or eating the wall and the time it takes to get off.
And it's a real skill of that snap judgment, how fast you're going, how far you're from the wall, and distributing that over allowable strokes. Say in our situation, like stroke cycles going on the wall. But I think, and that's why I think it should be practiced really all the time on different developing skills, say maybe on a slower speed, but really it's a judgment. It's that it's how basketball players make a, before they do like a free throw, they just do that snap judgment, how far they are, how high they need to jump, how much they need to push the ball. I think that kind of a skill for swimmers to develop is very important.
Yeah, they get a little more awareness, a little more confidence, and they're more confident going into the wall, and I feel like they can get off the wall. The other part to that too is I always tell my breaststrokers and flyers to crane their eyes a little bit forward the last few strokes so that they make sure that they're right there, not necessarily lifting your head, but you're basically starting your turn a couple of strokes out
before, like
and
anticipating.
you're judging it. So it's not a snap judgment at the last second.
Right. Definitely not in the last second. Snap judgment, three stroke cycles before the wall, way before that happens. Absolutely. But it's a skill. It's real something that athletes need to develop, and they're doing a lot of turns in the practice. There are plenty of opportunities to really do that if they pay attention.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I think got an idea. Do you like, one thing that I like to do in practice, but as far as race analysis go, we are timing turns, and I'm going to stop this for a second. We are timing turns in freestyle and backstroke from when the head drops to when the feet push. So we would be doing it, now to boom, when it is, and we'd like them to be 1 second or less. I mean, that's kind of the general pattern. On fly and on breaststroke, we are marking it from the hand hit to the foot push.
Right.
And again, we'd like to be 1.0 or better.
Right. Absolutely. And that kind of lines up with what I've seen. There is, if I feel that if the turn can be a little bit quicker, but I think if it takes away from the quality of movement, from the power, I don't think it's necessarily justifiable. But also, if it's much too long, and that's definitely also it's a loss in the race.
I think it's something that it's just another one of those little markers that the kids can look at after races. Sometimes I will, and in an effort to try to put the entire turn together, the approach, the turn, and the transition out of the wall, I will time at different places in practice. And then sometimes I have them timed. So sometimes we'll do it from the flags in and out. Then sometimes we'll do it 8 meters in and 8 meters out. And you begin to realize what works best for you. And so I think that's those are drills that I think you have to do.
Yeah, I think anything can, this is measurable and really turn into a little bit of inner squad competition always helps.
Yeah. So, and that kind of leads us to finishes. And I'm on this swim of Blake's that we'll talk about. And the counting your cycles going into the wall is the same on a finish as you're talking about on a turn. Being aware of where the wall is, and hopefully accelerating you're into that wall a little bit and seeing it. So again, I really like this finish because, and this is Blake here, he's like inching up to second place maybe, or maybe still in third place midway here. And now, he just turns it on. and he's going to stop breathing about 8 meters out, and he's going to just find the wall, you know. And those kids that have that ability, they're just racers. This is why.
And I want to point it out, Kevin, also that I would bet my money that Blake didn't really accelerate into the wall. He just slowed down the least in the field.
Yeah, you're probably right. He clearly, and you can tell this is practiced. And I know we did it in high school, and I know they did it at IU. About 8 meters, he just stops breathing and keeps the stroke long. And you're probably right. Maybe not accelerating into the wall, but certainly
not slowing down as much as the rest of the field.
Right. And as far as the numbers go on that, this is his lead off the 800 free relay. The other race you just saw, I don't have that analyzed, but this, you can see in the first length's not great, but he's reasonably holds his pace. He messed up there a little bit, but he's reasonably keeps it the same going into his walls, and then really tries to accelerate coming into the finish. And I think that's a big part of it. But that's something too that you've got to demand day in and day out. Asking kids how many kicks they're taking off the wall, during all the repeats, keep them honest. Reminding them that in every repeat, every practice, every set, they're going to do a race finish. So they're going to stop breathing at either 5 yards or 8 meters out, depending on the level that your kid is at. And you're going to demand them to do it every single time for them to be able to do this.
And I think it's a cumulative effect of practicing and refining and finding in different circumstances, set situations, finding their way and polishing that skill. And definitely, it's a skill, right? A very important one.
So a drill to work on that. I mean, sometimes I will take 2 kids that are of, reasonably equal ability, and just let them, practice finishes racing against one another. And they get into that. I found, especially with the guys, the more you can make it a challenge, the more you can make it a game, the more you can make it, I win, you lose. They get into it, and they get better. And I think then they see the value of a good one.
A little healthy competition brings the best out of everybody, right?
Right. So maybe in the 10 minutes or so that we have left, I think let's at least discuss a little bit of some ways of integrating this into practice. And I like to do a little bit of race pace stuff every day. I know a lot of people cycle it throughout their week, but I just think it's really important. And whether it's broken swims or whether it's test sets, but on those types of swims, you can work on everything. You can work on your start, you can count your kicks, you can work on your turns, you can work on your stroke rate, you can work on your length of your stroke, you can work on turns, you can work on your finish, and do it over and over again. And better yet, if you videotape it, then you can also really, if you've got SwimCloud software, you can get all the metrics too. So I think it's specificity.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I would only add maybe that there is a progression definitely from the beginning of a season throughout the season, and I would start on really practicing this race pieces on intervals and comfortable intervals, maybe 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, and having really enough hits on the skill where athletes begin to replicate the skill consistently, maybe get say take 50s on a minute, kind of start from 6 and keep building and building, then maybe get up to 16 at race pace 200, and then go into broken swims where you're do maybe say 200 broken swim, where you're begin to bring those pieces together on much shorter rest interval, and then kind of culminate either in the race simulators or like predictor sets. And the best answer I ever got, asking Dr. Sokolovas, Gennady, what would be the best predictor set for 100 free? And he kind of looks at me and said, it's 100 free. So there is no better there is no better predictor set than really the time trial. You just do it all together. And I thought that was a great answer, and I always kept it in mind. So kind of keep that transition and allow athletes opportunities to really practice that skill throughout the season. Identifying those pieces are always really like quarters of the race, like 200, quarter of 200 would be 50, like quarter of 400 would be 100. Well, I like those quarters. And I think I got it kind of from running coaches. They often use this in a quarter mile, and I think there's a lot of similarities in that, and it go from quarters to halves or thirds, halves, and kind of keep that progression throughout the season.
Are there, and I've got some test sets that are kind of things that I do a lot, but what are some of your kind of go-tos as far as when you're trying to do race pace type of?
Kind of starting from the short end and going into long end. It's a 425s in a minute that basically gives you double time of the 25, gives you the opening 50 for 100, then 450s on 130, and athletes would do that progressively. 450s on 130, that kind of gives them the back half of 100. 650s on a minute, also progressive. That's a second, third, and fourth 50 of 200. I like using also hundreds on the 30 seconds rest, and then that becomes more of a middle distance, and then 200s on 15 to 30 seconds rest repeats. But important is to cover the whole spectrum of physiology, rather than just focusing only on the anaerobic end of things, because there is a lot going on throughout the whole spectrum. And as you pointed out in your presentations, which I thought was really, really good, is that what helps athletes to close the race, and oftentimes it's an area of max VO2. That's the skill that always helps, because you can really break any race into those components, top end speed, then or like easy speed, then when things begin to hurt, right? And what carries athletes through that.
Right. I've had a lot of success getting kids to buy into race rehearsal, is what I like to call it, because and I approach it, and as you know, and Scott's heard this too, the first quarter of the race is where your speed work comes into play. The first 25 of 100, the first 50 of a 200, the middle portion, the middle 50 of 100, the middle 100 of a 200 is where the aerobic stuff kicks in, and then the last quarter, the last 25, last 50 of a 200 is where your anaerobic kicks in, and it's how you can blow past somebody that you were behind the whole race if they're struggling and you're surging. So I get them to really get up there and go. And I think for the boys, that's the part of the practice they love the most, and they wait the whole thing for it so that they can get up there and they can race each other. And it really is a way to work on all the specifics.
Right.
and to predict what you're going to do, that next race.
Right. One of the things that help my athletes experientially kind of setting up for a successful 200 race, we would do this series of 75s, which I would tell them, I want you to go as fast as you can, but when you finish, for your heart rate not to be higher than 26. Because I feel that at that point, athletes who gets faster to that point on the lowest heart rates has the greater ability to delay that anaerobic onset in the race and finish race better than the ones who reaches that point at 75 meters of the race at the heart rate 30. There's nowhere to go, but basically at some point backwards. And you can see sometimes that athletes on the last 50, some of them, the way they look like they're swimming in mud. Yeah, and there's just so much
yeah,
effort going
absolutely.
on, but they're just going nowhere. And you see some others maintaining that kind of a clean break, kind of slide and glide type look. It's a look, and I think I really felt that that helped my athletes to get the feeling what it is to go really fast, but controlled heart rate. And we would do this series of 75s on and on and on and on until,
it lets them
kind of leading just to feel. It's not just Coach Alex wants me to, but they would understand, and they would have enough practice, kind of creating that sensation, knowing what that limit is.
That allows them to learn. It allows them to try different strategies and figure out, kind of like we talked about in the very beginning, learning for them to learn themselves, and then they're going to buy into it so much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, let me get a couple of questions worked in here before we go too long. Kevin, I think you mentioned for freestyle, turning at the flags. Did you ever do any mid-pool open turn stuff, or any benefit to that?
Well,
both of you guys?
That's basically like a no-wall turn.
The no-wall turn.
Yeah, it's a fantastic skill, I think.
It is great, and there's lots of different ways to set that up. But I think it's a great skill. There's nothing like taking advantages away and making you deal with it. It really is. You'll learn to get around quick, regardless of stroke you're doing, if you do no wall turns. So I think there's value to that.
Okay. And then kind of on that same turn topic, Coach Alex talked about the, trampoline quite literally in the gymnastics area. With you guys and all the analysis that you've done, do you feel there's any trampoline effect to the resistance off the wall from the water itself?
From the water.
Trampoline effect. I think one of the reasons, and I don't know if I'm understanding this right, but when I say that you can bounce off the wall, okay, you can do that in the water that you really can't do out of the water because of the resistance of the water, et cetera. You can do that. A drill that I do out of the water to work on that is, we call it depth jumps. And I got that from a clinic, I think from John Tremblay at Tennessee a long time ago. As in our dry land, they'll be standing on the first bleacher. So they're, a foot and a half above the ground or whatever. And they will step off and try to bounce on the ground. So they'll try not to land, cushion, and push. They'll step off and start their feet so that they bounce off there, and they begin to feel it.
Like a plyometric.
Exactly. It's a plyometric move. And then you can take that into the water, and they have the same feel. The water protects you. You're not going to hurt yourself unless your ankles come out and hit. And we've all had kids starting out that have done that. But
that's really neat. That's a neat concept, Kevin.
Yeah. Any other questions here?
I think I've got them all worked in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I know there was one question from somebody I saw that popped on, and Alex and I were in the middle of something and talked about and finishes too. And I
think that was Coach Thorpe talking about adding a finish to that mid-pool open water.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Then you can work on finishes. Any time that you can set up finishes, you know, you're going to do how many lengths in a practice? How many times are you going to finish at that wall? If you finish lazily and glide in and stuff, you know, eventually that's what you're going to do when you get tired. So I think habits are so important, and that's why it's important that you pay attention and stay on them all practice long. It's easier just to sit down and let them swim, but what do you got?
Right.
You know. So yeah.
Right.
Well, I definitely learned that in the gardening, because things that I don't pay attention to, the grows weeds, and the roses seem to awfully take a lot of care, and pruning and constant watering and constant attention. But the weeds doing just fine. And I think you can kind of take the same kind of thinking or analogy into the races. If you really let the athletes be on their own devices, I think they're going to develop habits regardless. What I'm hoping as a coach, that they will develop the habits that they actually will need, and that will be instrumental in helping them to win the race. But they will develop habits one way or another.
Right.
I would
Trying to
much
get
rather
them.
develop the habits that are helpful.
I'm going to end.
That's
I'm
awesome.
going to end one more thing in here, Scott, if I can.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And we're kind of running over time, but you know, everybody has their list of test sets and things that they like to do, and they're all great. One thing that I found, and I don't even know where I got this from, but I call it extended 50s. We have a stretch 25 pool. So the bulkhead is set at 25 yards. Then you have the diving well to the end and back. So this is something that is fun, and the kids will eat this up, and it forces them to work on components. So extended 50s. So you're going to do, you know, 5 or 6 50s on a lot of time, because this is tiring. So you do it on 2.5 minutes or whatever. So they sprint the first 25, just push off, sprint the first 25, get out of the water, go across the bulkhead, dive in, underwater kick to the deep end wall, get a breath, underwater kick back, climb out, dive in, and sprint back to a good finish. So, you know, it's tiring. You're getting some dry land in, because they got to lift themselves out. You're getting some underwater work in, and combined, so it gets tough. You're making them sprint. They can work on finishes. And my kids try to beat their time. So, you know, they really get into it. It's fun. And it really works everything. And they will be dragging when they're done with it, but they'll be dragging and smiling. Two good things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Great stuff today, gentlemen.
Yep. Alex, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin.
Really appreciate it.
Scott. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right. With that, we'll wrap up today's session.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Scott.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.